Tonight, we're going to confront one of the most sobering truths about our place in the cosmos. Not whether aliens exist. Most scientists think they probably do, somewhere out there in the vastness of space. The question we're exploring tonight is far more profound and far more unsettling. Even if intelligent civilizations are scattered throughout the galaxy, even if thousands of them are out there right now, looking up at their own night skies, wondering if they're alone, the universe has built barriers between us that no technology can overcome. By the end of tonight, you're going to understand why we are, in the deepest possible sense, cosmically quarantined, and why the distances, the speeds, and the fundamental laws of physics conspire to ensure that no matter how advanced any civilization becomes, contact between stars is not just difficult, it's effectively impossible. Before we get started, if you love exploring the depths of space as much as we do, take a second to like the video or subscribe. It's a simple action, but it helps this channel reach more curious minds like yours. Now, let's begin. There's something darkly ironic about humanity's search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We've spent billions of dollars building radio telescopes. We've broadcast messages into space, announcing our presence. We've sent probes carrying golden records with images and sounds of Earth. We scan the skies, listening for signals that might indicate someone out there is trying to reach us. And all of this effort rests on an assumption that contact is possible, that, if they exist, we could meet them, that the universe is a place where civilizations can find each other. But the universe doesn't care about our hopes. It doesn't care that we're curious or lonely or desperate to know we're not alone. The universe operates according to laws of physics that were set at the moment of the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And those laws have consequences. Consequences that make the galaxy a very different place than what science fiction has led us to imagine. Let's start with the most basic problem: distance. Not just distance in the abstract sense. Distance in the specific, crushing, almost incomprehensible sense that defines space. The nearest star to our Sun is Proxima Centauri. It sits 4.24 light-years away. That's about 25 trillion miles. The fastest spacecraft humanity has ever built is the Parker Solar Probe, which reached a maximum speed of about 430,000 miles per hour as it dove close to the Sun. At that speed, unprecedented in human engineering, it would still take over 6,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. That's longer than recorded human history. And Proxima Centauri is our closest neighbor. It's right next door in cosmic terms. The vast majority of stars are far, far more distant. The average distance between stars in our region of the galaxy is about 5 light-years. But that average is misleading because stars aren't distributed evenly. Some regions are more crowded, some are more sparse. And as you move toward the galactic center, the density increases. But even in the relatively crowded galactic core, stars are separated by light years. The galaxy is mostly empty space. Vast, dark, cold, empty space, punctuated by tiny islands of matter, scattered so far apart that light itself, the fastest thing in the universe, takes years to travel between them. This is the first barrier. Distance so vast that even traveling at speeds we currently consider impossibly fast would take thousands or tens of thousands of years to cross the gulf between stars. But maybe, you might think, an advanced civilization could do better. Maybe they have technology we can't imagine. Maybe they've found a way to travel faster. This brings us to the second barrier, the speed of light. And this one isn't a technological limitation. It's a fundamental law of the universe. Nothing can travel faster than light. Not because we haven't figured out how yet, but because the structure of space-time itself forbids it. Einstein's special relativity, published in 1905, established this as a cornerstone of modern physics, and it's been confirmed by countless experiments over the past century. The speed of light in a vacuum is exactly 299,792,458 meters per second, about 186,282 miles per second. And this isn't a speed limit in the sense of a law you could break if you tried hard enough. It's a speed limit built into the fabric of reality. As an object with mass accelerates closer to the speed of light, strange things happen. Its mass increases. The energy required to accelerate it further increases exponentially. To actually reach the speed of light would require infinite energy. And we don't have infinite energy. You might have heard of various theoretical loopholes. Warp drives that compress space in front of a ship and expand it behind, letting the ship surf through space faster than light, without technically moving faster than light through space. Wormholes that connect distant points in space, allowing travel between them without crossing the intervening distance. These concepts appear in the equations of general relativity under very specific, exotic conditions. But there's a vast gulf between something being mathematically possible on paper and something being physically achievable in reality. Warp drives, as proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre in 1994, require negative mass or negative energy density. We've never observed negative mass. We have no idea how to create it, or whether it even can exist in stable forms. The amount of exotic matter needed to create even a small warp bubble is estimated to be equivalent to the mass energy of multiple planets or even stars. That's not a technological challenge. That's a thermodynamic impossibility. Wormholes face similar problems. Even if they exist, they're predicted to be unstable. They'd collapse almost instantly unless held open by enormous amounts of exotic matter with negative energy density. Again, we come back to the same problem. We need materials and energy sources that, as far as we know, don't exist and can't exist. Some physicists have proposed that vacuum fluctuations, or Casimir effect, might provide tiny amounts of negative energy. But the Casimir effect produces infinitesimally small forces. Using it to stabilize a wormhole would be like trying to hold open a collapsing building with a feather. The scale is absurdly, impossibly wrong. So let's set aside the fantasy solutions. Let's assume that any civilization, no matter how advanced, is bound by the same laws of physics we are. They can't exceed the speed of light. They can't create exotic matter that doesn't exist. They have to work within the constraints of reality as it actually is. What then? Could a civilization build a ship that travels at a significant fraction of light speed? Say 10% of light speed, or even half light speed? The engineering challenges are staggering, but perhaps not theoretically impossible. Let's explore what that would mean. Traveling at 10% of light speed, the journey to Proxima Centauri would take 42 years. That's within a human lifetime. Multiple generations wouldn't be necessary. You could send a crew of young astronauts, and they might, just barely, live to see arrival. But building a ship capable of 10% light speed presents problems that make our current space program look like child's play. The energy requirements alone are almost beyond comprehension. Kinetic energy increases with the square of velocity. Double your speed, and you need 4 times as much energy. Triple your speed, and you need 9 times as much energy. Reaching 10% of light speed means the kinetic energy of your spacecraft is enormous. To accelerate even a relatively small ship, say 1,000 tons, to 10% of light speed requires energy equivalent to detonating approximately 150,000 nuclear weapons. That's more than every nuclear weapon currently on Earth combined. And that's just to get up to speed. You'd need roughly the same amount of energy to slow down at the destination. Double your fuel requirements. Where does this energy come from? Chemical rockets are completely inadequate. The most efficient chemical rockets achieve exhaust velocities of about 2.8 miles per second. To reach speeds of 18,641 miles per second, you'd need exponentially more fuel. The rocket equation tells us that the amount of fuel needed increases exponentially with the change in velocity you're trying to achieve. For the speeds we're discussing, the fuel mass would be thousands or millions of times larger than the payload mass. You'd be accelerating mostly fuel, which requires more fuel, which requires more fuel. It doesn't work. Nuclear fusion offers better energy density. If you could achieve sustained, controlled fusion, which we still haven't managed on Earth after decades of trying, you might get exhaust velocities of a few percent of light speed. That's better. But the engineering challenges of building a fusion rocket that can operate continuously for decades are immense. You're dealing with temperatures of millions of degrees. Materials that can withstand those conditions while also being light enough for space travel. Magnetic confinement systems that work reliably for decades without maintenance. Radiation shielding for the crew. Every component must function perfectly because you're in the middle of interstellar space with no possibility of rescue or resupply. Matter-antimatter annihilation is the most efficient energy source we know of. When matter and antimatter collide, they completely convert to energy. According to Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. This gives you the maximum possible energy from a given mass. But antimatter doesn't exist naturally in any significant quantity. We have to create it in particle accelerators at enormous energy cost. Currently, we can produce tiny amounts of antimatter, a few nanograms per year, across all the particle accelerators on Earth. Creating the kilograms or tons of antimatter needed for an interstellar mission would require energy inputs equivalent to the total global power consumption for years or decades. And then you have to store it somehow. Antimatter annihilates instantly on contact with normal matter, so it must be contained in magnetic or electric fields, never touching the walls of its container. Any containment failure means instant catastrophic explosion. Storing tons of antimatter for a decades-long journey with perfect reliability is a challenge that makes fusion look simple. Let's say, generously, that a civilization overcomes all these challenges. They build the engines. They produce or acquire the fuel. They create a ship capable of traveling at 10% of light speed. They're ready to cross the gulf to the nearest star. Now they face another problem that might be even worse than the energy requirements. Interstellar dust and gas. Space is not empty. Between the stars, there's an extremely diffuse medium of hydrogen atoms, dust grains, and cosmic rays. The density is incredibly low. Typically, 1 atom per cubic centimeter in interstellar space. For comparison, the air you're breathing has about 2.5 times 10 to the 19th atoms per cubic centimeter. Interstellar space is a vacuum far better than anything we can create in a laboratory. But when you're traveling at 10% of light speed, even these sparse atoms become deadly projectiles. An atom of hydrogen hitting your ship at 10% of light speed carries enormous kinetic energy. At those velocities, each atom impacts with energy comparable to a high-speed bullet. And you're not encountering just one atom. You're encountering trillions of atoms per second. The cumulative effect is like flying through a sandblaster operating at relativistic speeds. The front surface of your ship would be eroded away. Any exposed components would be stripped off. Electronics would be fried by radiation created when high-energy particles collide with your hull. You need shielding. Heavy shielding. Meters of solid material between the interstellar medium and anything you want to protect. But shielding is mass. Every kilogram of shielding is mass you have to accelerate and decelerate. More mass means more energy requirements, which means more fuel, which means more mass. You're back to the tyranny of the rocket equation. Some designs propose using magnetic fields to deflect charged particles before they hit the ship. This works in principle, but requires enormous magnetic field strengths extending miles ahead of the ship. The power requirements for generating these fields add to your energy budget. And magnetic fields don't deflect neutral atoms or dust grains. You still need physical shielding for those. As you increase your velocity towards significant fractions of light speed, the problems get exponentially worse. At half-light speed, every collision has 4 times the energy of a collision at 1/4 light speed. At 90% of light speed, cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang that permeates all of space, becomes blue-shifted into high-energy gamma rays from your perspective. The universe itself becomes a radiation hazard. You're bathed in lethal radiation just from the act of moving fast through space. Let's assume again, even more generously, that all these problems are solved. The engines work. The fuel exists. The ship is built with adequate shielding. A crew boards the vessel and begins the journey to the nearest star. Now we encounter the human element, and this might be the cruelest barrier of all. Time, not just the decades needed for the journey, but the psychological, social, and biological reality of spending decades or centuries confined to a small artificial environment with no possibility of return. A journey to Proxima Centauri at 10% of light speed takes 42 years one way. That's assuming you could accelerate and decelerate instantaneously, which you can't. Realistic acceleration and deceleration periods add years to the journey. Let's say 50 years total, half a century confined to a spaceship. The crew that departs Earth would be elderly or dead by the time they arrive. If you want the people who make the journey to actually explore the destination, you need to send young adults. People in their 20s or 30s who might live to their 70s or 80s and still have a few years to study the alien world before they die. These people will never return to Earth. They will never see their families again. They will never walk on Earth's surface again. They will never breathe air that wasn't recycled through machines. They will spend the majority of their remaining lives in a metal tube, hurtling through darkness. The psychological impact of such isolation is difficult to overstate. Studies of people in isolated environments like Antarctic research stations, submarines, and long-duration space station missions show that even with modern communication and the knowledge that they can eventually go home, people struggle. Depression is common. Interpersonal conflicts arise. People develop anxiety, sleep disorders, and cognitive impairments. And those are missions lasting months, not decades. On an interstellar voyage, You can't just abort the mission and go home. You're committed. Once you've accelerated to cruising speed, you're halfway through your fuel. Turning around means continuing to the destination anyway, because you've already expended the energy to get partway there. The ship becomes a prison, a very small prison, with the same few dozen or few hundred people for the rest of your life. Maintaining social cohesion over decades in such an environment would require extraordinary psychological screening and support systems. You'd need to select crew members not just for their technical skills, but for their ability to function in extreme isolation. You'd need robust conflict resolution mechanisms. You'd need activities to maintain mental health and prevent boredom. You'd need to carefully manage resources to avoid the tragedy of the commons scenario, where individuals consume more than their fair share, because they're thinking about their immediate needs, rather than the long-term sustainability of the mission. And all of this assumes the ship's systems continue functioning. Any critical failure, any leak in the life support, any malfunction in the reactor, any breakdown in the food production or water recycling systems, and everyone dies. There's no rescue, no spare parts from Earth, no engineers who can fly up to fix the problem. You have only what you brought with you. Every critical system needs redundancy, and that redundancy needs to be maintained for decades. Some have proposed generation ships, vessels so large that multiple generations could live aboard them. The original crew would grow old and die during the journey. Their children would continue the mission. Their grandchildren or great-grandchildren would be the ones to arrive at the destination. But this introduces even more profound problems. Problems that aren't just engineering challenges, but fundamental questions about human nature and society. Consider what life aboard a generation ship would actually be like. You're born in a metal cylinder, hurtling through space. You've never seen Earth. You never will see Earth. Every story about blue skies and oceans and forests is secondhand, passed down from parents who heard it from their parents who heard it from the original crew. The Earth, in those stories, becomes mythological over time, less a real place and more a founding legend. Like how ancient Rome became idealized in medieval Europe. The reality replaced by the story. The children born on such a ship would have a fundamentally different relationship to the mission than the original crew. The original crew chose this. They volunteered, knowing they would die in transit. They accepted that sacrifice for reasons that mattered to them. Scientific curiosity, perhaps. The survival of humanity. The thrill of being pioneers. Whatever their reasons, they were their own reasons. But their children didn't choose any of this. They were born into a mission they had no say in, committed before they existed to a journey they might not want to make. What happens when those children grow up and have their own children? Does the mission still feel meaningful to the third generation? The fourth? The original crew might have clear memories of why this matters. They remember Earth. They remember the reasons for leaving. They carry the vision that started the journey. But by the fourth or fifth generation, all of that is abstraction, ancient history. The mission becomes simply the way things are. Not a choice, but an inherited fate. And here's where it gets psychologically complicated. Studies of isolated communities on Earth show that over time, cultural drift occurs. Languages change. Values shift. Practices evolve. What started as one culture becomes something different. Sometimes radically different. On a generation ship, this drift would be amplified. You have a small population completely cut off from Earth. No new cultural input. No immigration bringing fresh perspectives. No contact with the broader society from which they came. Just the same few hundred or few thousand people and their descendants. Evolving in isolation for hundreds or thousands of years, the culture that develops would be unlike anything on Earth. It would have to be adapted to life in an artificial environment. Every aspect of life would be shaped by the ship. Your entire world is a machine. Everything you have, everything you eat, every breath of air comes from technological systems. Those systems must be maintained. The ship must function. Individual desires become secondary to collective survival. You can't have the kind of individual freedom people on Earth take for granted. You can't waste resources. You can't break critical systems. You can't reproduce without population limits, because the ship can only support so many people. This would create a society far more regimented than most earthbound societies, more controlled, more focused on duty and collective responsibility. Personal freedom would have to be curtailed for survival, and over generations, that becomes normal. The people aboard don't think of themselves as oppressed. This is simply how life works. You have your role. You do your job. You maintain the systems. You raise the next generation to do the same. But what if someone doesn't want to? What if the fifth generation includes people who question the mission, who ask why they should spend their lives traveling to a destination they'll never see, who want to stop the ship and just live in interstellar space? Who propose turning around and trying to return to Earth, even though everyone who sent them is long dead? You can't control what people think or want. You can't force belief in a mission across generations. And if enough people lose faith in the purpose of the journey, the whole enterprise collapses. There's a darker possibility too: social breakdown, violence, civil war aboard the ship. We know from history that isolated communities can develop internal conflicts, religious schisms, political factions, disputes over resources. Aboard a generation ship, there's nowhere to go to escape conflict. You can't found a new settlement somewhere else. You can't have different groups living separately. Everyone is trapped together. If serious conflict arises, it could be catastrophic. Sabotage of life support systems, fighting that damages critical equipment, factions trying to seize control of the ship. Any of these could doom everyone aboard. The original crew presumably had psychological screening. They were selected for stability, cooperation, ability to handle stress and isolation. But you can't screen the children. They're whoever is born. Some will be well-adjusted. Some won't be. Some will have mental illness. Some will be violent or antisocial. You can't select them out. You can't send them away. You have to integrate them into the community somehow. And if you can't, if they become destabilizing forces, what do? You don't have prisons that can hold someone for decades. You can't exile them. The only real sanction is execution. And that creates its own moral horrors and social instability. The descendants of the original crew didn't choose to make this journey. They were born into it. They have no memory of Earth, except stories told by their parents or grandparents. They live their entire lives in an artificial environment, knowing they will die before reaching the destination, so that their own children might have a chance at something different. What kind of culture develops in such a society? What if the third or fourth generation decides they don't want to continue the mission? What if they choose to turn the ship around or halt it in interstellar space and just live there? They weren't the ones who agreed to spend their lives traveling. Can you morally bind unborn generations to a mission their ancestors chose? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're practical problems that would need solutions. And there aren't good solutions. You could try to instill belief in the mission through education, make it part of the culture. Tell stories of Earth and the destination. Create rituals and traditions that reinforce the mission's importance. Essentially, turn the journey into a religion. Something sacred that questioning becomes blasphemy. But that only works if the indoctrination is effective, if it's maintained across generations, if no one starts to see through it. And the moment people start questioning, the moment the mission becomes something imposed rather than chosen, you have the seeds of resistance. Generation ships face another problem that's rarely discussed in science fiction: genetic diversity. To maintain a healthy population over hundreds of generations without inbreeding, you need a minimum population size. Geneticists estimate somewhere between 500 and several thousand individuals, depending on how carefully you manage reproduction. That's a lot of people to support on a spacecraft. Each person needs food, water, air, living space. Children need education. Sick people need medical care. Everyone needs something to do with their time. Some useful purpose to give their lives meaning. But here's the thing. On Earth, populations maintain genetic diversity through immigration and emigration. People from different regions meet and have children together. This mixes genes across populations, prevents any one group from becoming too inbred. On a generation ship, there's no immigration. No new genetic material coming in. You're stuck with whatever genes the original crew brought. Over hundreds or thousands of years, genetic drift occurs. Random mutations accumulate. Harmful recessive genes can spread through the small population. Without careful management, you could end up with serious genetic problems, increased rates of genetic diseases, reduced fertility, lower immune function. To prevent this, you'd need active management of reproduction, not just recommendations, but actual control. Who has children with whom would need to be determined to maximize genetic diversity and minimize relatedness. This isn't a society where people freely choose their partners based on love or attraction. It's a society where reproduction is managed like a breeding program for the good of the species, to ensure the mission's survival. But that's a level of control over the most personal aspects of human life that most people would find deeply disturbing. Yet, it might be necessary. And if it's necessary, it would profoundly shape the culture aboard the ship. Then, there's the question of resources and sustainability. A generation ship would need to be almost completely closed loop. Water recycled endlessly. Air scrubbed and regenerated. Waste broken down and reused. Food grown hydroponically or through other space-efficient methods. Everything recycled because there's no resupply. This works in theory. We know closed ecological systems can function. Space stations do this on small scales for limited times, but maintaining a truly closed system for hundreds or thousands of years, that's never been tested, never been proven possible. Every system has inefficiencies. Every recycling process loses some material. Water might break down into hydrogen and oxygen through electrolysis, and some hydrogen might leak into space. Trace elements might get locked into waste products that can't be fully recycled. Over centuries, These tiny losses add up. The ship's reserves slowly deplete. You start the journey with a certain amount of material, but over time, that amount decreases. Maybe by the time you reach your destination, you're critically low on essential elements. Maybe you run out before you arrive. No way to resupply. No way to replace what's lost. The ship slowly dying of resource depletion even as it approaches its goal. There's also the problem of equipment degradation. Every machine wears out. Every component has a finite lifetime. On Earth, when something breaks, you replace it. You order new parts. You manufacture what you need. But on a generation ship, you can't order parts from Earth. They won't arrive for decades or centuries. By the time they get to you, they're useless. You have to be completely self-sufficient, able to manufacture any component you might need. This means carrying the raw materials and the industrial capacity to make everything from circuit boards to hull plating. The ship would need to be part spacecraft and part factory, with machine shops, electronics, fabrication, chemical synthesis capabilities. All of this adds mass. More mass means more energy needed to accelerate and decelerate. It's the rocket equation again. Every additional capability you add makes the ship heavier, which makes the mission harder, which requires more fuel, which makes the ship even heavier. At some point, the whole thing becomes impractical. The ship would need to be so massive that accelerating it to any significant fraction of light speed becomes impossible. So generation ships face a fundamental contradiction. They need to be large enough to support a viable population for hundreds or thousands of years. They need to carry enough resources and manufacturing capability to be completely self-sufficient. They need enough redundancy and backup systems to handle failures over centuries. But they also need to be small enough that you can actually accelerate them to speeds that make interstellar travel practical. These requirements pull in opposite directions. Make the ship bigger, and you can support more people and carry more resources, but you can't accelerate it effectively. Make it smaller, and you can accelerate it, but you can't support enough people or carry enough resources. There might be no sweet spot where both requirements are satisfied. The concept might simply not work. Let's step back from generation ships for a moment and consider a different approach. What if instead of sending living crews, we send frozen embryos or seeds? Genetic material that could be implanted and grown at the destination. Or suspended animation where the crew is frozen for the journey and revived on arrival. These concepts solve some problems, but create others. Suspended animation faces technical challenges we haven't solved. We can freeze cells and even simple organisms. We can preserve embryos at liquid nitrogen temperatures. But freezing a whole human body without damaging it, that's far beyond current technology. Water expands when it freezes. Ice crystals form inside cells and rupture cell membranes. Even if you use cryoprotectants, chemicals that prevent ice crystal formation, you still face problems. The process of cooling and rewarming causes damage. Thermal stresses crack tissues. Chemical gradients form. Some parts of the body cool faster than others, creating internal stress. And that's just the freezing process. You then have to maintain the frozen state for decades or centuries. Equipment must function perfectly for the entire journey. Any failure, any power loss, any warming, and the crew dies. You'd need incredible redundancy and reliability. Systems that can operate autonomously for longer than human civilization has existed. No maintenance, no repairs, just perfect operation for hundreds or thousands of years. That's a level of reliability we've never achieved in any technology. Sending embryos or genetic material avoids some of these problems. Embryos are small and can be frozen successfully with current technology. You could send millions of them using far less mass than a crewed ship would need. But now, you face a different problem. Who raises these children when they arrive? You'd need artificial wombs to bring the embryos to term, machines to care for the infants, systems to educate the children. Essentially, you'd need to raise human children from birth to adulthood using only automated systems. No parents, no human caregivers, no social interaction except with machines and each other. What kind of humans would result from such an upbringing? We know from psychology that early childhood experiences profoundly shape development. Children raised without human warmth and interaction develop severe psychological problems, attachment disorders, difficulty with social relationships, emotional regulation issues. These aren't just personality quirks. They're fundamental developmental deficits that affect everything about how a person functions. Can you create psychologically healthy adults from embryos raised entirely by machines? We don't know. It's never been tried. And the stakes are incredibly high. If it doesn't work, if the children grow up damaged, unable to form a functioning society, the entire mission fails. There's another aspect of interstellar travel that science fiction often glosses over, but which has profound implications. Relativistic effects. Time dilation. As you approach the speed of light, time behaves strangely. This isn't science fiction. It's confirmed physics. Tested countless times in particle accelerators and with atomic clocks. Einstein's special relativity tells us that time passes more slowly for objects moving at high speeds. From the perspective of someone traveling at 90% of light speed, time inside the ship passes normally. You feel 1 second per second. Your heart beats at normal rate. You age normally from your own perspective. But to an outside observer, to someone watching from Earth or from the destination, your time appears to be passing more slowly. The faster you go, the more extreme this becomes. At 99% of light speed, time on board passes about 7 times slower than time on Earth. A 10-year journey, from the crew's perspective, takes 70 years of Earth time. At 99.9% of light speed, the factor is about 22. A 10-year journey for the crew is 220 years for Earth. This creates strange scenarios. You could travel to Proxima Centauri, spend some time there, and return to Earth. From your perspective, the journey might take 20 years. You leave at age 30 and return at age 50. But on Earth, centuries have passed. Everyone you knew is dead. Civilizations have risen and fallen. Technology has advanced far beyond what existed when you left. The Earth you return to is completely unfamiliar. You're a time traveler to the future, unable to return to your own time, unable to reconnect with the world you left. For interstellar travel between civilizations, this makes meaningful contact even more difficult. Suppose Earth detects a signal from a civilization 1,000 light-years away. We decide to send a mission. A ship capable of 99.99% of light speed. From the crew's perspective, the journey takes about 14 years, thanks to time dilation. They arrive, spend time studying the alien civilization, then return. Another 14 years from their perspective. They've been gone about 30 years total. They've aged 30 years. But back on Earth, 2,000 years have passed. 2 millennia. The civilization that sent them no longer exists in any recognizable form. Rome at its height to modern times is about 2,000 years. Imagine the changes over such a span. The languages spoken have changed completely. The political systems are entirely different. The technology is unrecognizable. The culture is alien. The travelers return to a world that has moved on without them. Their mission report, their data, their experiences are historical curiosities, ancient history from a vanished era. This puts a strange twist on interstellar exploration. Any attempt to maintain connection between a traveling ship and home becomes impossible. The ship effectively travels into the future. Each journey is one way temporally, even if it's two-way spatially. You can return to the same place, but you can't return to the same time. The past is gone. You're stranded in the future. And if this applies to us, it applies to any alien civilization attempting to reach Earth. Even if they had the technology to travel at near light speed, even if they made the journey, by the time they arrived, thousands or millions of years might have passed in their home system. Their civilization might have evolved into something completely different, might have gone extinct, might have abandoned technology and returned to simpler ways of life, might have transcended physical form and uploaded into computers. Whatever they find when they return home, it won't be what they left. Time dilation also means that different parts of the galaxy effectively exist in different time frames. A civilization 1,000 light-years away that we see today, we're seeing as they existed 1,000 years ago. If we sent a message and they replied immediately, we'd receive their response in 2,000 years. But if we sent travelers and they journeyed at near light speed with extreme time dilation, they might experience only years, while thousands of years pass everywhere else. The travelers would be living in the past, from their own perspective, but arriving in the far future, it creates temporal disconnection layered on top of spatial distance. The biological challenges of generation ships are equally daunting. You need a genetically diverse population to avoid inbreeding. Geneticists estimate a minimum viable population of several hundred individuals to maintain genetic diversity over multiple generations without severe inbreeding problems. That's several hundred people who need food, water, air, living space, medical care, education, and something to do with their lives for decades. The ship would need to be enormous, more mass, more energy requirements, more shielding. The challenges compound. But there's another biological challenge that's even more concerning: radiation. Space is filled with radiation. Cosmic rays, high-energy particles from supernovas and other violent cosmic events stream through the galaxy constantly. Solar radiation from stars, gamma rays from distant sources. On Earth, we're protected from most of this radiation. Our atmosphere absorbs it. Earth's magnetic field deflects charged particles. We're shielded, safe. We evolved in this protected environment, and our biology reflects that. But in space, there's no atmosphere, no magnetic field once you're away from a planet. Just you and the radiation. Cosmic rays pass through spacecraft hulls like they're not even there. They pass through human bodies. When a cosmic ray particle hits a cell, it can damage DNA, cause mutations, increase cancer risk. Over short periods, this is manageable. Astronauts on the International Space Station receive higher radiation doses than people on Earth. but not enough to cause immediate problems. But over years or decades of interstellar travel, the accumulated dose becomes dangerous. The radiation exposure on an interstellar journey would be far higher than anything experienced in low Earth orbit. In low Earth orbit, you're still partially protected by Earth's magnetic field. You orbit through the safe regions inside the field. But on an interstellar journey, you'd be in deep space. No protection, just constant bombardment. Studies suggest that astronauts on a Mars mission, which takes about 6 months each way, would receive radiation doses close to the maximum recommended lifetime exposure. An interstellar journey, taking decades, would expose travelers to radiation far exceeding any safety limits. Shielding helps, but has limits. You can block some radiation with mass. Water is good shielding. So is lead or other dense materials. But cosmic rays are so energetic that even thick shielding only reduces the dose, doesn't eliminate it. And every kilogram of shielding is mass you have to accelerate. The ship gets heavier. The fuel requirements increase. You're back to the tyranny of the rocket equation. Some particles are so energetic they create secondary radiation when they hit shielding. They slam into atoms in your shield and create a shower of new particles. Sometimes, the secondary radiation is worse than the primary radiation. Too much shielding can actually make things worse. There's an optimal thickness where you block most radiation without creating too much secondary radiation. But even at that optimal thickness, significant radiation still gets through. Long-term exposure to this level of radiation would have several effects. Increased cancer rates, obviously, but also damage to the nervous system, cognitive impairment, potential fertility problems, damage to eyes causing cataracts, weakened immune system. These aren't hypothetical concerns. They're observed effects in astronauts who've spent extended time in space. And they're from missions lasting months, not decades. Scale those effects up to a years-long or decades-long mission, and you have serious problems. You could try to protect the crew with magnetic shielding. Generate a magnetic field around the ship to deflect charged particles. This works in principle and would mimic Earth's protective magnetosphere, but the energy requirements are enormous. You need a field strong enough and large enough to surround the entire habitable area. That means superconducting magnets operating continuously for years or decades. Any failure means the crew is suddenly exposed to full radiation levels. And again, the mass and power requirements add to your already staggering challenges. Even with the best shielding, some radiation gets through. The crew would be at elevated cancer risk. You'd need extensive medical capabilities aboard the ship, ability to diagnose and treat cancers. Perhaps genetic therapies to repair radiation damage. Medical equipment and pharmaceuticals that remain effective for decades. Medical knowledge that can be maintained across generations if it's a generation ship. All of this adds complexity, mass, and points of failure. There's another radiation concern that's rarely discussed. Solar flares. When a ship approaches its destination star, it would be exposed to that star's radiation environment. If the star is active, prone to flares, it could unleash bursts of radiation far more intense than normal background levels. A solar flare could deliver a lethal dose of radiation in hours if the crew isn't protected. On Earth, we're protected by our atmosphere and magnetic field. On a spacecraft approaching an alien star, you'd be vulnerable. You'd need to monitor the star for flare activity and have some kind of radiation shelter. a heavily shielded area the crew can retreat to during dangerous events. More mass, more complexity. Beyond radiation, there are other cosmic hazards. Micrometeoroids, tiny particles of rock and ice floating through space. At interstellar speeds, even a grain of sand carries enormous kinetic energy. Hitting a micrometeoroid at 10% of light speed would be like being hit by a bomb. The particle would vaporize on impact, creating a cloud of superheated plasma that could punch through hull materials. You need armor. Thick armor, or multiple hull layers with spacing between them, so that impacts are absorbed by outer layers before reaching critical systems. Again, more mass. Worse, you can't see most micrometeoroids coming. They're too small to detect at a distance. The first warning you have is when they hit your ship. You have to design for redundancy. Any critical system must be protected or have backups so that a single impact doesn't doom the mission. Your life support needs to be distributed. Your power systems need to be redundant. Your computer systems need backups. You need multiple layers of protection between space and the habitable areas. At high enough speeds, even individual atoms become dangerous projectiles. Interstellar space contains about 1 hydrogen atom per cubic centimeter on average. That doesn't sound like much. And it isn't if you're moving slowly. But at relativistic speeds, each collision releases significant energy. A spacecraft moving at 90% of light speed through this sparse hydrogen gas would experience erosion of its forward surfaces. Over years or decades, the cumulative effect could be substantial. You'd need replaceable forward shielding or some kind of self-healing material that can withstand constant erosion. Some designs propose using a magnetic field to clear a path ahead of the ship. The field would push charged particles out of the way before the ship reaches them. This works for charged particles, but not for neutral atoms or dust grains. And the field would need to extend far enough ahead of the ship to be effective. At 90% of light speed, you're covering 90% of a light year per year. To have time to deflect particles, your field would need to extend light hours or even light days ahead of the ship. The engineering challenges of creating such an enormous field are immense. There's also the problem of navigation. At interstellar distances, you can't simply point at a star and fly straight there. Stars move. They orbit the galactic center at hundreds of miles per second. By the time you reach where a star was when you started your journey, the star has moved. You need to aim not at where the star is, but at where it will be when you arrive. This requires precise measurements of the star's motion and precise calculations of trajectory. For nearby stars, this is manageable. We can measure their proper motion, their movement across the sky, fairly accurately. But for distant stars, the measurements become uncertain. Small errors in measuring position or velocity accumulate over long journey times. You might arrive at your destination to find the star system isn't quite where you expected. You'd need to make course corrections during the journey. That means keeping precise track of your position and velocity relative to your destination. It means having enough fuel, not just for the main burn, but for corrections. Every course correction requires fuel, which means more mass at the start, which means more fuel needed for the initial acceleration. Navigation in interstellar space faces another fundamental problem. There's nothing to navigate by. Near Earth, you can use stars as reference points. You know where you are, based on which stars are visible and where they appear in the sky. But once you're in interstellar space, far from any star, the stellar reference frame becomes ambiguous. Stars are so far away that your position relative to them changes very slowly. You'd need extremely precise measurements to determine position. Atomic clocks and very long baseline interferometry, perhaps. Technology that can measure your position relative to distant quasars or other reference points. But this requires capabilities that may or may not be achievable with technology light enough to launch. Let's think about what happens when you actually arrive at your destination. You've traveled for decades or centuries. You finally reach the target star system. Now what? You need to slow down. Deceleration requires just as much energy as acceleration. If you accelerated to 10% of light speed using half your fuel, you need the other half to slow down. But here's the thing. You've been traveling for decades. Your ship has been exposed to radiation and micrometeoroids. Systems have degraded. Components have failed. Even with the best maintenance, some things won't have been repairable. Now, you need to execute a complex deceleration maneuver with equipment that's been operating in harsh conditions for longer than most machines on Earth operate. If your engines fail during deceleration, you fly right through the target system. No second chance. No way to turn around because you've used your fuel. You've gone from Earth to wherever, and you're still moving at 10% of light speed with no way to stop. You become a generation ship, whether you plan to be or not. Forever traveling through space, unable to reach any destination. Assuming deceleration succeeds, you're now in orbit around an alien star. This star is not the Sun. Its spectrum is different. Its radiation environment is different. Any planets have different orbits, different compositions, different conditions than planets in our solar system. You need to study this system. Figure out which planets, if any, might be habitable or at least usable. This takes time. More years of surveys and analysis. If you find a suitable planet, you face the challenge of actually landing and establishing a presence. The planet wasn't made for humans. The gravity might be different. Too high and everything is heavier. Your body struggles against the constant pull. Your heart works harder. Your bones compress. Too low, and you might lose bone density, muscle mass, cardiovascular fitness over time. The atmosphere might not be breathable. Could be too thin, too thick, wrong composition, toxic gases, insufficient oxygen. You'd need to live in sealed habitats indefinitely or terraform the planet over thousands of years. Terraforming is another challenge entirely. To make a planet habitable for humans, you'd need to change its atmosphere, temperature, possibly its rotation rate or magnetic field. These are planetary-scale engineering projects. They would take centuries or millennia with technology we can barely imagine. You'd need enormous energy inputs. You'd need to transport or synthesize vast amounts of materials. You'd need to maintain the terraforming process over timescales longer than human civilizations have existed. And all of this assumes the planet is sterile. No existing life. Because if there is life, even microbial life, you face ethical questions about whether you have the right to transform a living world to suit your needs. You'd be destroying an entire biosphere, potentially a unique experiment in evolution, to create living space for your species. That's genocide on a planetary scale. If the planet has life, there's another problem. Contamination. Alien microorganisms that your immune system has never encountered. Your body has evolved defenses against Earth microorganisms. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. We've been in an evolutionary arms race with them for billions of years. Our immune systems are sophisticated, multi-layered, constantly adapting, but they're tuned to Earth life. They might not recognize alien microorganisms as threats, might not be able to fight infections from alien pathogens. This goes both ways. You'd also contaminate the alien biosphere with Earth microorganisms. Bacteria from your gut, your skin, your breath. These organisms would be alien to that world. They might find no resistance there, might spread uncontrollably, might cause ecological collapse. We've seen this happen on Earth when species are introduced to new environments. Rabbits in Australia, kudzu in America, rats on islands. Invasive species that outcompete native life because they evolved in different contexts. The native species have no defenses. The ecosystem is disrupted, sometimes permanently. Scale that up to entire worlds, and you can imagine the devastation. Earth microorganisms spreading through an alien biosphere, consuming resources, displacing native life, creating feedback loops that destabilize the whole system, or vice versa. Alien microorganisms spreading through human populations with no immune defenses. Plagues that would make Earth's worst pandemics look mild. These biological risks might make it impossible to safely colonize worlds with existing life. You'd be confined to sterile worlds, dead rocks, planets where life never arose or went extinct long ago. But such worlds wouldn't have atmospheres suitable for breathing without massive terraforming, wouldn't have water cycles or ecosystems or any of the things that make Earth habitable. You'd be starting from scratch, building everything. That's possible in principle, but extraordinarily difficult in practice. So even if you overcome all the challenges of the journey, even if you arrive safely at another star system, establishing a permanent presence faces its own set of potentially insurmountable obstacles. Each barrier compounds the others. Each challenge makes the whole enterprise more difficult, more expensive, more risky, and we haven't even addressed the most fundamental question: energy. Where does all the energy come from to do any of this? Let's talk about energy in concrete terms. Earth's entire civilization currently uses about 20 trillion watts of power continuously. That's all the electricity, all the fuel burned in cars and planes, all the industrial processes, all the heating and cooling, everything. 20 trillion watts. 20 terawatts. That sounds like a lot. And it is compared to a single human who personally uses maybe 2,000 watts on average. But compared to what's needed for interstellar travel, it's nothing. To accelerate a 1,000-ton spacecraft to 10% of light speed requires roughly 1.8 times 10 to the 20th joules of energy. That's the kinetic energy the ship needs to have. To put this in perspective, that's equivalent to the total energy output of all power plants on Earth running for about 300 years. 3 centuries of human civilization's entire energy production, just to accelerate one small ship, and you need the same amount again to decelerate at the destination. Double the energy cost. If you want to travel faster, the energy requirement goes up with the square of the velocity. To reach 50% of light speed, you need 25 times more energy. To reach 90% of light speed, you need 81 times more energy. The costs escalate rapidly. And these are just the energy costs for the kinetic energy of the ship itself. They don't include the energy lost to inefficiency in whatever propulsion system you use. Real engines aren't perfectly efficient. Rockets might be 20% to 50% efficient, depending on the technology. Nuclear fusion might be more efficient, but still not perfect. So the actual energy you'd need to generate would be several times higher than the minimum theoretical requirement. Where does this energy come from? Not from Earth. We don't produce enough energy collectively to launch interstellar missions. Not even one mission, and certainly not if we want to launch many missions or if other needs for energy compete for the same resources. You'd need to harness the sun's energy directly, build collectors in space, solar panels in orbit around the sun or closer where solar energy is more concentrated. A Dyson swarm, perhaps. Millions or billions of satellites collecting solar energy and beaming it to where it's needed. But building such an infrastructure is itself an enormous undertaking. It would require launching millions of tons of material into space, building and deploying collectors, maintaining them. The energy cost of building the collection system might exceed what the system can collect for years or decades. You'd need to invest enormous resources up front, with payoff only in the distant future. What civilization makes such an investment? Why would they? This is one of the many filters in the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox asks, if intelligent life is common, where is everyone? Why don't we see evidence of alien civilizations? One answer is that there are many filters that prevent civilizations from becoming visible or expansive. Most life stays microbial. Most complex life never develops intelligence. Most intelligent species never develop technology. Most technological civilizations destroy themselves or collapse before they become spacefaring. And even those that survive and advance might choose not to pursue interstellar expansion because the costs are too high and the benefits too uncertain. Think about it from the perspective of an advanced civilization. You've solved your resource problems. You have abundant energy from your star. You have access to raw materials from asteroids and planets in your system. You can build habitats in space. You can create comfortable, safe, controlled environments anywhere in your solar system. You have everything you need. Why spend enormous resources on interstellar travel? What do you gain? The only things unique to other star systems are information and living space. Information about how life evolved on other worlds. Examples of alien biology, alien ecosystems, alien evolution. That's scientifically interesting. But you don't need to send crewed missions to gather that information. You can send probes. Small robotic probes that explore and send data back. Cheaper, lighter, no life support needed. You could send thousands of probes for the cost of one crewed mission. Living space is the other potential motivation. If your population is growing and you're running out of room in your solar system, you might look to other stars. But here's the thing. A solar system contains enormous amounts of living space if you're willing to build habitats in space rather than living only on planets. The material in the asteroid belt could be converted into rotating space habitats with total living area equivalent to thousands of Earths. Every rock, every comet, every small body represents potential living space. You'd have to mine it, process it, build structures. But that's vastly easier than interstellar travel. By the time you've used up all the living space in your own solar system, you're talking about a civilization so advanced, so populous, that it might as well be a god compared to current humanity. Such a civilization would have capabilities we can't imagine. If they wanted to pursue interstellar expansion, maybe they could. But they might also have transcended physical form entirely, uploaded themselves into computers, built virtual worlds more interesting than physical space, found fulfillment in directions we can't conceive. This is sometimes called the zoo hypothesis. The idea that alien civilizations exist but we don't see them because they've chosen not to expand, not to make themselves obvious. They're quietly living their lives in their own solar systems. Maybe they're even observing us like we observe animals in nature preserves, watching but not interfering. The galaxy might be full of such civilizations, each in its own corner, each minding its own business, none traveling between stars because the cost-benefit analysis doesn't justify it. Or maybe civilizations do try interstellar expansion, but fail. The journeys are too long. The ships break down. The crews die, or turn back, or go mad. Most missions fail, and the few that succeed don't justify the enormous costs. After a few attempts, civilizations give up. They decide it's not worth it. They turn inward instead of outward. They explore virtual space, or inner space, or higher dimensions of mathematics and physics. They find fulfillment in ways that don't require crossing the vast empty gulfs between stars. There's another possibility worth considering. Maybe intelligence is temporary. Maybe technological civilizations don't last long enough to become truly interstellar. We've existed as a technological species for perhaps 200 years. In that time, we've developed nuclear weapons, greenhouse gas emissions, antibiotic-resistant diseases, artificial intelligence that might outpace human control. We've created the means of our own destruction in multiple forms, and we've only barely started to address these existential risks. Other civilizations might face similar challenges. The same capabilities that allow technological advancement also create dangers. Nuclear technology gives you abundant energy, but also weapons. Chemistry gives you medicines and materials, but also pollution and toxins. Biology gives you genetic engineering, but also potential bioweapons. Artificial intelligence gives you automation and capability, but also loss of control. Each advancement comes with risks, and maybe most civilizations don't successfully navigate those risks. If technological civilizations typically last only a few hundred or a few thousand years before destroying themselves or declining, then at any given moment, very few exist. They appear briefly, flicker, and vanish, like fireflies in the dark, too brief and too far apart to make contact. Even if millions of civilizations have existed in the galaxy's history, if they each only last a few thousand years, the chance that two exist simultaneously, close enough to communicate, is small. This connects back to the synchronicity problem we discussed earlier. For contact to occur, civilizations must overlap in time and space. They must exist at the same time and be close enough that signals can travel between them within the lifetime of both civilizations. If civilizations are rare in space and brief in time, the odds of overlap become vanishingly small. Two civilizations might both exist in the same galaxy and never know about each other because they're separated by thousands of years. One rises after the other has fallen. Ships sent by the earlier civilization arrive at the location of the later one before it exists or after it's gone. There's a final, darker possibility. Maybe interstellar travel is deliberately avoided because contact between civilizations is dangerous. Maybe most civilizations that announce their presence or send ships to other stars get destroyed. This is the dark forest hypothesis. The idea that the galaxy is like a dark forest full of hunters. Everyone is hiding because revealing yourself means becoming a target. Why would contact be dangerous? Because civilizations might compete for resources. If two civilizations discover each other and one is more advanced, the more advanced one might decide to eliminate the other as a potential future threat. Better to destroy a less advanced civilization now than risk them advancing and becoming dangerous later. This is ruthless and paranoid thinking. But it's not impossible. It's based on the logic of mutual distrust and the uncertainty of others' intentions. If this is how the galaxy works, then the civilizations that survive are the ones that stay quiet, the ones that don't broadcast their presence, the ones that don't send ships to other stars, because doing so reveals where you are. The galaxy appears empty, not because no one is out there, but because everyone who's survived has learned to hide. This is speculation, of course. We have no evidence for or against the dark forest hypothesis. But it's a possibility that would explain why we don't see obvious signs of alien civilizations, despite the apparent likelihood that they exist. And it would mean that attempting interstellar travel or broadcasting our presence is potentially suicidal. We'd be revealing ourselves to unknown and potentially hostile others. Whether the dark forest hypothesis is true or not, the fact that it's plausible adds another layer of concern to interstellar contact. Even if we could build the ships, even if we could make the journey, maybe we shouldn't. Maybe the smart play is to stay quiet, stay hidden, develop in isolation until we're advanced enough to defend ourselves against whatever else is out there. Or maybe contact is safe, but we'll never know, because the barriers are so high that no one ever tries. All of these possibilities, the technical barriers, the energy costs, the time involved, the synchronicity problem, the potential dangers, they all point to the same conclusion. Interstellar travel and contact between civilizations is not just difficult, it's effectively impossible. Not impossible in the absolute sense. The laws of physics don't forbid it. But impossible in the practical sense that no civilization would rationally attempt it given the costs, risks, and uncertain benefits. And if it's impossible for us, it's impossible for them. Any aliens out there face the same barriers we do. The same vast distances, the same speed limits, the same energy requirements, the same time constraints. They're trapped in their solar systems just as we're trapped in ours. We might all be looking up at the night sky, wondering if anyone else is out there. And the answer might be, yes, they are. Thousands of civilizations, perhaps. Millions over the history of the galaxy. But none of them can reach the others. The universe has built walls between us that cannot be crossed. We're all isolated, all alone, all wondering, with no way to confirm that others exist or to make contact if they do. That's the brutal truth about our place in the cosmos. Not that we're alone in the sense that life exists only on Earth, but that we're alone in the sense that even if others exist, we're permanently separated from them, forever. Not by our limitations, but by the structure of the universe itself. The distances are too vast, the speeds too constrained, the times too mismatched, the energy costs too high, the risks too great. Contact isn't just unlikely, it's functionally impossible. And we need to accept that reality. Accept that Earth is our home, not just now, but forever. That the stars are beautiful to look at, but forever beyond our reach. That we're part of a cosmic community we can never actually join. That we're connected to the universe through the laws of physics and the atoms we're made of, but disconnected from anyone else who might share it. This isn't a comfortable truth. It's not what we want to hear. We want to believe that if we just build better ships, develop better technology, invest enough resources, we can overcome the barriers. We can reach the stars. We can meet our neighbors. We can join the galactic community, but that's fantasy. The reality is that the universe is structured in a way that keeps us apart, not through malice or intention, simply through the fundamental constants and laws that govern everything. Those constants and laws create barriers we cannot overcome. Not now, not ever. Not even in principle, regardless of how advanced we become. So, what does this mean for humanity's future? What does it mean for how we should think about ourselves and our place in the universe? If we accept that we're cosmically isolated, permanently confined to our solar system, with no possibility of ever meeting alien civilizations, how does that change our perspective? First, it makes Earth infinitely more precious. If this is the only planet we'll ever have, the only biosphere we'll ever experience, the only place in the entire universe where we can truly thrive, then preserving it becomes paramount. We can't afford to destroy Earth's environment thinking we'll just move to another planet someday. There is no other planet for us, not in any meaningful sense. We could potentially colonize Mars or build habitats elsewhere in our solar system. But these would be artificial environments, sealed domes, underground bunkers, rotating space stations. Nothing like the living, breathing, self-sustaining biosphere of Earth. Earth is special, not because it's the only planet with life, though it might be, but because it's the only planet in this entire vast universe that was made for us, where our ancestors evolved over billions of years, where every aspect of our biology is finely tuned to the environment. The gravity, the atmosphere, the temperature range, the day length, the seasons, the ecosystem. Everything about Earth fits us because we evolved to fit Earth. On any other world, even if we could survive with technology, we'd never truly belong. We'd always be aliens, always dependent on our machines to protect us from an environment that wasn't made for life like ours. This realization should fundamentally change how we treat our planet. Climate change, extinction, pollution, resource depletion. These aren't just problems we should try to address. They're existential threats to the only home we'll ever have. We can't just move somewhere else if we ruin Earth. We can't start over on a fresh planet. This is it. All we have. All we'll ever have. If we destroy it, we've destroyed our species' only chance at a future. Second, cosmic isolation gives new meaning to our relationships with each other. Every human being, every culture, every nation, everyone who has ever lived or will ever live, we're all in this together. Not in some vague aspirational sense, but in the deepest possible sense. We're the only minds, like ours, in the observable universe. The only intelligence on this scale in our corner of the galaxy. Maybe there are others far away, but they might as well not exist for all the interaction we'll ever have. The conflicts that divide us, national borders, ethnic differences, religious disagreements, political ideologies, they're all internal matters. Human problems for humans to solve. There's no outside perspective coming. No alien civilization to mediate our disputes or offer wisdom from their own experiences. No galactic community to join that would make our petty earthbound conflicts seem small. We're on our own. The only ones who can solve our problems are us. And we need each other because we're all each other has. This should make us more collaborative, more cooperative, more willing to compromise and find common ground. If we're the only intelligent minds in our cosmic neighborhood, we have a responsibility to not waste that. To not destroy ourselves through war or hatred or short-sighted thinking. To preserve and nurture the one example of technological intelligence that exists in our region of space. Third, isolation gives urgency to the question of what we do with our existence. If there's no galactic destiny waiting for us, no grand cosmic role to play, no other civilizations to meet and learn from and compete with, then we have to define our own purpose. What do we want to accomplish? What kind of civilization do we want to be? What legacy do we want to leave? These become more important questions when you realize that nobody else is watching. Nobody else is judging. Nobody else even knows we exist. We could destroy ourselves tomorrow, and the universe wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, would continue exactly as it would have anyway. Or we could flourish for millions of years, becoming wise and advanced and building a civilization worthy of pride. And still, the universe wouldn't care. The universe is indifferent. What we do with our existence matters only to us. This could be depressing. The idea that we're insignificant on a cosmic scale, that nothing we do matters to the universe at large. But it can also be liberating. We're free to decide what matters. Free to create our own meaning. Free to pursue whatever goals we choose without needing approval or validation from cosmic peers. We're writing our own story. The only ones who can, the only ones who will. Maybe we pursue knowledge, develop science and mathematics and philosophy to the highest levels possible. Understanding the universe, not because anyone else cares, but because we care. Because understanding is intrinsically valuable. Because the universe has organized matter into a form capable of understanding itself. And we're that form in this region of space. Maybe we pursue beauty, create art and music and literature, build magnificent structures, make Earth a masterpiece, not to impress aliens who will never see it, but to satisfy our own aesthetic drives, to leave something beautiful for future generations, to celebrate existence through creation. Maybe we pursue happiness and well-being, focus on making life good for everyone, eliminate suffering where we can, create conditions for human flourishing. Not as a means to some greater end, but as an end in itself, because making existence better is worth doing for its own sake. Or maybe we pursue all of these things and more. The point is, we get to choose. We're not following some cosmic script written by older, wiser civilizations. We're not trying to join a galactic club that has standards and expectations. We're alone. And that aloneness means we're free. Free to be whatever we want to be. Free to define success on our own terms. Free to fail and try again without judgment. Fourth, isolation changes how we think about time. If we're never going to meet aliens, if we're never going to spread across the galaxy, if our ultimate scope is limited to this solar system, then the distant future becomes more conceptually manageable. We're not trying to plan for a civilization that spans thousands of star systems. We're planning for a civilization confined to one solar system that needs to sustain itself indefinitely. Indefinitely is a long time. Longer than we typically think about. Our star, the Sun, will continue shining for about 5 billion more years. That's enough time for the entirety of human history up to now to play out 1 million times over. It's a staggering amount of time, more than enough for civilizations to rise and fall countless times. More than enough for evolution to produce entirely new forms of life from whatever survives the current era. More than enough for humanity to change beyond recognition, to split into separate species, to merge with our technology, to become something we wouldn't recognize as human anymore. In 5 billion years, anything could happen. We could achieve unimaginable heights of wisdom and capability. We could decline and go extinct. We could cycle through periods of advancement and collapse like civilizations on Earth have done throughout history. We could deliberately guide our own evolution, choosing what we want to become. We could create artificial intelligence that surpasses us and either serves us or replaces us or merges with us. The possibilities are endless. And 5 billion years is long enough to explore many of them. We don't need the galaxy to have a rich and meaningful future. We have time. Enormous amounts of time. More time than we can comprehend. All within the confines of our solar system. Finally, cosmic isolation gives us a different relationship with the unknown. We'll always wonder if we're alone. We'll always look up at the stars and ask if anyone is out there. We'll probably keep searching for signals, keep listening, keep hoping. Because we can't help but wonder. It's part of being human. Part of being curious, exploratory creatures who want to know what's beyond the next hill, the next horizon, the next boundary. But we'll have to accept that we might never know. We might search for centuries or millennia and never detect a signal. That doesn't mean no one is there. It might just mean they're too far away, existing at the wrong time, or staying deliberately quiet. Or it might mean we are alone. The only intelligence that has ever arisen in this galaxy or in the observable universe. We'll probably never know which. And that uncertainty has to be okay. We have to be comfortable with not knowing, with the permanent ambiguity of our situation, with the fact that some questions might not have answers we can access. The universe doesn't owe us answers. It doesn't owe us company. It simply is what it is. And we exist within it, alone or not alone, but either way, unable to reach anyone else who might be out there. This is a mature perspective, an acceptance of reality as it is, rather than as we wish it would be. It's letting go of the fantasy of galactic empires and first contact and trading knowledge with alien civilizations. It's accepting that our sphere of influence, our domain of control, our region of interaction is limited to our solar system. That's our neighborhood, the only one we'll ever have. And we need to make the most of it, need to treat it well, need to appreciate how extraordinary it is that we exist at all. That matter organized itself into forms capable of thought and feeling and wonder. That we can contemplate the cosmos and understand the laws that govern it. That we exist in this brief window of cosmic history where the universe is old enough for complexity to have arisen, but young enough that we can still see distant galaxies and gather evidence of cosmic evolution. We're lucky to exist, lucky to be aware, lucky to have this one planet in this one solar system, in this one corner of the galaxy. The universe didn't have to produce us. It didn't have to organize matter into forms capable of experiencing and understanding. But it did, and that's profound. That's meaningful, even if no one else knows, even if no one else cares. We know, we care, and that's enough. You'd also need to maintain genetic and cultural diversity. A small, isolated population tends to drift genetically and culturally. Mutations accumulate. Cultural practices ossify. Languages might change. By the time the ship arrives at its destination, the people aboard might be noticeably different from the humans who launched the mission. And we haven't even addressed the most fundamental question. Why would anyone go? What could possibly motivate a civilization to invest the enormous resources needed for interstellar travel. We often assume that any advanced civilization would naturally want to explore, to expand, to seek out new worlds. But that assumption reflects our own cultural values. It's not a universal law. Exploration carries risks and costs. In the past, human exploration was often driven by resource scarcity or competition. Nations explored to find new trade routes, to claim resources, to escape persecution or poverty. But a civilization capable of building interstellar ships has, almost by definition, solved its resource problems. You can't build a spacecraft that can travel between stars if your civilization is struggling to feed itself or running out of essential materials. The energy and industrial capacity needed for interstellar travel implies a civilization with access to their star's energy output. A Dyson swarm, perhaps, or fusion power so abundant that energy is effectively unlimited. Such a civilization would have access to the resources of its own solar system: asteroids containing metals and minerals, comets containing water and organic compounds, gas giants providing hydrogen and helium. Everything they need is available locally. Why travel decades or centuries to another star system to get resources you already have at home? The only resource that might be unique to other star systems is information. Knowledge of alien biospheres, examples of how life evolved differently on other worlds. But you don't need to send people for that. You could send probes. Small, robotic, self-replicating probes that explore and report back. These probes could be much smaller and lighter than crewed ships. They don't need life support or living space. They don't have psychological needs. They can travel for centuries without caring. And they're much cheaper to launch. You could send thousands of probes for the cost of one crewed mission. This is the Fermi paradox in a different form. If interstellar travel is so difficult, so expensive, so time-consuming, and so risky, why would anyone do it? And if no one does it, where are all the aliens? Even if civilizations exist, even if they're common, the barriers to travel between stars might be so immense that no one ever tries. We imagine aliens as explorers because we project our own drives onto them. But a truly advanced civilization might be one that has transcended the urge to expand, one that finds fulfillment in internal development rather than external exploration, one that builds virtual worlds more interesting than physical ones, one that pursues knowledge through simulation and computation rather than through physical travel. But let's set aside motivation. Let's assume some civilization does decide to attempt interstellar travel despite all the challenges. Maybe they're driven by necessity. Their sun is dying, and they need to find a new home. Maybe they're driven by curiosity, so profound, it overrides all practical concerns. Maybe they have reasons we can't imagine. They build the ship. They make the journey. Decades or centuries pass. They arrive at a nearby star, and now they face another crushing realization. They've traveled for decades or centuries, and they've moved only a few light years. The galaxy is 90,000 light years across. The distance they've traveled is infinitesimal on a galactic scale. They're still isolated, still alone, still separated from other civilizations by distances so vast that the journey they just completed, the journey that consumed lifetimes and resources, was just a single step. This is the third barrier, the sheer scale of the galaxy. If civilizations are common, they're still separated by hundreds or thousands of light years. To cross those distances would require not decades, but millennia or tens of thousands of years. Generation ships would need to function for thousands of generations. That's longer than recorded human history, longer than human civilization has existed. The oldest, continuously functioning human institutions, certain religions and governments, are only a few thousand years old, and even they have changed dramatically over that time. Can you design a ship and a mission that remains coherent for 10,000 years? Can you create a culture aboard that ship that maintains its purpose across 500 generations? People separated from Earth by thousands of years of travel time would have no meaningful connection to Earth anymore. They wouldn't remember why the mission started. They'd be their own civilization, distinct and separate. And even if they succeeded, even if after thousands of years they reached another star system and found a planet capable of supporting life and established a colony there, that colony would be isolated. Communication with Earth would take hundreds or thousands of years. A message sent from the colony would reach Earth centuries after it was sent. The response would come centuries later. The people who sent the message would be long dead. Their descendants would receive a reply from Earth, as it was nearly 1,000 years ago, sending messages to the distant past, receiving replies from ghosts. The colony and Earth would diverge. Different environments produce different evolutionary pressures. Different cultures develop different values and practices. Within a few thousand years, the colony and Earth would be separate species culturally, if not yet biologically. Give it 10,000 years, and biological divergence becomes plausible too. Different planets have different gravity, different atmospheric composition, different day lengths, different seasons. Natural selection would push the populations in different directions. They'd still share a common origin, but they'd be as different as humans and Neanderthals. And this assumes the journey succeeds. Most interstellar missions would probably fail. Ships would break down. Crews would die from equipment failures or radiation exposure or social collapse. The vast majority of attempts would end in silent tombs drifting through the void. We'd never know how many civilizations tried and failed. We'd only potentially detect the tiny fraction that succeeded. And even successful colonies might not last. Building a sustainable civilization on an alien world, a world that didn't evolve to support your biology, a world where every microorganism is potentially toxic and every plant is inedible, is extraordinarily difficult. You'd need closed ecosystems capable of supporting a population indefinitely. You'd need to terraform the planet over thousands or millions of years to make it truly habitable. Or you'd live forever in domes and bunkers, cut off from the surface, dependent on technology that must never fail. This brings us to an even deeper problem, the synchronicity problem. For two civilizations to make contact, they must exist at the same time. That sounds obvious, but consider the implications. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Earth is 4.54 billion years old. Life on Earth arose roughly 3.8 billion years ago, but for most of that time, life was single-celled. Multicellular life only appeared about 600 million years ago. Complex animals with brains and eyes and the capacity for intelligence only emerged in the last few 100 million years. Humans in our modern form have existed for only about 300,000 years. Technological civilization capable of radio communication has existed for barely 100 years. On cosmic timescales, we've been detectable for an eye blink, a fraction of a percent of Earth's history. and we have no idea how much longer our civilization will last. Will we still be here in 1,000 years? 10,000 years? 1,000,000 years? Human history is filled with civilizations that rose and fell. The Romans, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the countless cultures that thrived and then vanished. We like to think our technological civilization is different, more stable, more permanent. But we've only been at this for a few centuries. We don't know if technological civilizations are stable on timescales of millennia or millions of years. We could destroy ourselves through war or environmental collapse or resource depletion. Or we might simply change into something so different that we wouldn't recognize ourselves. A post-biological civilization that uploads consciousness into computers. A civilization that retreats into virtual reality. A civilization that achieves some form of transcendence we can't currently imagine. The point is, the window during which we're detectable, during which we exist in a form that could communicate with or travel to other stars, might be very brief. Tens of thousands of years, perhaps. Maybe 1,000,000 years, if we're very successful. That's still less than 1/100% of Earth's history. Now, consider another civilization on a planet orbiting another star. They have their own history, their own evolution, their own rise to intelligence and technology. The chances that their brief window of technological capability overlaps with ours are vanishingly small, unless technological civilizations are extremely common and extremely long-lived. Think about it this way. Imagine a galaxy where intelligent life emerges on one planet every 1,000,000 years. That would make life relatively common. Over the galaxy's 10-billion-year history, that's 10,000 civilizations. But if each civilization only lasts 10,000 years in its detectable form, then at any given moment, only about 100 civilizations are active. Spread across a galaxy 90,000 light-years across containing billions of stars. They'd be separated by thousands of light-years on average, too far apart to detect each other's radio signals, too far apart to travel to each other. They'd rise, exist for a brief moment, and fade into silence without ever knowing about each other. Ships, sent on journeys of thousands of years, would arrive at destinations where civilizations had long since vanished. Ruins, perhaps, artifacts, silent testaments to something that once was, but no living civilization to make contact with. And that assumes civilizations last 10,000 years. If the typical technological civilization lasts only a few centuries before destroying itself or transforming into something unrecognizable, the problem becomes even more severe. A few centuries is nothing on cosmic timescales. Civilizations would blink into existence and blink out again like fireflies on a summer night. Brief flashes of light in the darkness, too brief and too far apart to ever connect. This is one proposed solution to the Fermi paradox. Perhaps intelligent life is common. Perhaps the universe has produced millions of civilizations, but they're scattered across billions of years of cosmic history. Most of them existed and died long before we arose. Some will arise long after we're gone. The few that exist at the same time as us are too far away for contact. There's another aspect to the synchronicity problem that makes things even worse. Light speed isn't just a barrier to travel. It's a barrier to communication. Any signal we send into space travels at the speed of light. If we aimed a powerful radio transmission at a star 100 light-years away, that signal would take 100 years to arrive. If there's a civilization there, and they receive our message and immediately respond, their response would take another 100 years to reach us. 200 years for a single exchange. The people who sent the message would be dead. Their great-great-great-grandchildren might receive the reply. A conversation across the stars would take millennia. Each message, a letter from the distant past. Each reply addressed to people who no longer exist. And this assumes they're listening. Assume they happen to be pointing a radio telescope in our direction at the exact moment our signal passes through their star system. Assume they're using radio frequencies at all. Maybe they've moved beyond radio to some form of communication we haven't discovered yet. Laser communication, quantum entanglement communication, if that's even possible. Some technology that doesn't involve electromagnetic radiation at all. We'd be shouting at each other using different languages, neither able to hear the other. The space of possible communication technologies is vast. The chance that two civilizations separated by hundreds of light years happen to use compatible technologies during the same brief historical window is incredibly small. Even if contact were established, even if two civilizations managed to exchange messages across the light years, what would they have to say to each other? What meaningful relationship can exist between civilizations separated by centuries of communication delay? You can't have a conversation. You can't negotiate in real time. You can't develop the kind of ongoing interaction that we think of as contact. At best, you could exchange information, scientific knowledge, cultural artifacts, mathematical proofs, stories, and art. But it would be more like archaeology than communication. You'd be learning about a civilization as it existed centuries ago, not as it exists now. By the time you receive their message, they might be completely different or gone entirely. This is the fundamental isolation of the universe. Not just that space is vast, but that the combination of vast distances, the light speed limit, and the brevity of technological civilizations means that even if the galaxy is full of life, even if intelligence is common, even if thousands of civilizations exist right now, they can't reach each other. They can't communicate meaningfully. They're trapped in their own solar systems, separated by gulfs that no amount of technology can bridge. Each civilization alone, with its own thoughts, its own discoveries, its own fate, connected to the cosmos only by the light from distant stars. Light that left those stars thousands or millions of years ago. Light from civilizations that might be long dead. But there's an even deeper issue we haven't yet addressed. The assumption that alien life would be anything like us. We imagine aliens as beings we could relate to. Beings that think and feel and communicate and build civilizations. Beings that want to explore or make contact. But that's an anthropocentric assumption. Life on Earth took billions of years to produce intelligence. For most of Earth's history, life was microbial. Single cells floating in the ocean, photosynthesizing or metabolizing sulfur compounds. No brains, no eyes. No behavior more complex than moving toward food or away from toxins. Then, multicellular life emerged. First, simple organisms. Then, more complex ones with specialized cells and tissues. Eventually, animals with nervous systems. But intelligence, the kind of intelligence that can manipulate tools and build civilizations, only emerged once in Earth's entire history. Once out of billions of species across billions of years. Intelligence might be a fluke, an accident of evolution on one planet under very specific circumstances. On Earth, Intelligence evolved in primates that had hands for grasping, social structures that rewarded cooperation and communication, and environments complex enough to select for problem-solving ability. Change any of those factors, and intelligence might never have evolved. Most species on Earth are not intelligent in any meaningful sense. Trees don't ponder their existence. Bacteria don't build radio telescopes. Jellyfish don't develop mathematics. The vast majority of life, even complex multicellular life, has no use for intelligence. Intelligence is expensive. Brains consume enormous amounts of energy. The human brain is about 2% of body mass, but uses 20% of our caloric intake. That's a huge evolutionary cost. Intelligence only evolves if the benefits outweigh that cost. If there's an ecological niche where being smart helps you survive and reproduce more than being strong or fast or well camouflaged, or any of the other countless survival strategies evolution has discovered. On most planets, that niche might never exist. Maybe life arises and stays microbial forever. Maybe it evolves into complex, multicellular forms that fill every niche without ever needing intelligence. Maybe the conditions that led to intelligence on Earth, the specific sequence of ice ages and climate shifts and tectonic activity and asteroid impacts that created the selection pressures for larger brains. Maybe those conditions are rare. If intelligence is rare, then the galaxy might be full of life, full of thriving biospheres, but empty of anyone to talk to. Planets covered in alien forests, or oceans teeming with alien fish, or continents crawling with alien insects. But no one building cities, no one inventing writing, no one developing science, no one looking up at the stars and wondering. And even if intelligence does evolve, there's no guarantee it leads to technology. Dolphins are intelligent. They have complex social structures. They use tools in limited ways. They communicate with sophisticated vocalizations. But they don't build anything. They can't manipulate their environment in the way humans can, because they don't have hands. They live in water where fire is impossible, and metalworking can't develop. An intelligent aquatic species might never develop technology, no matter how smart they are, because the path from intelligence to technology requires specific physical capabilities and environmental conditions. You need appendages that can manipulate objects. You need an environment where you can create and control fire. You need access to materials like metals and silicon that can be shaped into tools and machines. Take away any of those, and technology might never develop. So, even if life is common, even if intelligence sometimes evolves, the subset of intelligent life that develops technology might be vanishingly small. And the subset of technological civilizations that survive long enough and develop the capability for interstellar communication might be smaller still. Each filter reduces the numbers. From all stars to stars, with planets to planets, with the right conditions for life, to planets where life actually arises, to planets where life becomes complex, to planets where intelligence evolves to. Planets where technology develops to civilizations that survive long enough to be detectable. By the time you've applied all those filters, you might be left with a handful of civilizations scattered across billions of stars. So rare, so far apart, that contact is impossible. Here's another angle that makes the situation even more dire. The universe is expanding. Not just expanding, accelerating. Dark energy, whatever it is pushing space apart faster and faster. Galaxies that are gravitationally bound to each other, like the Milky Way and Andromeda, will eventually merge. But galaxies that aren't gravitationally bound are moving apart and will continue to move apart forever. The observable universe, the part of the universe from which light has had time to reach us, is currently about 93 billion light-years across. But the universe beyond our observable horizon is much larger, possibly infinite. And it's expanding. Distant galaxies are moving away from us faster than the speed of light because space itself is expanding. Their light will never reach us. We'll never see them. And this expansion is accelerating. In the far future, billions of years from now, every galaxy beyond our local group will have moved beyond our cosmic horizon. Their light will be stretched to infinite wavelength. They'll fade from view. Future civilizations arising in our galaxy or in Andromeda after the merger will look out into the cosmos and see nothing. Just a few dozen galaxies in the local group, and beyond that, darkness. The rest of the universe moving away at speeds greater than light, invisible and unreachable. Those civilizations won't even know the universe is vast. They won't know about the Big Bang or cosmic expansion, or the billions of galaxies that once filled the sky. Their universe will appear to be just a small cluster of galaxies, surrounded by infinite, empty space. They'll have no evidence of anything beyond. We live in a privileged time. A brief window in cosmic history where the universe is old enough for stars and planets and life to exist, but young enough that we can still see the distant galaxies. Young enough that evidence of the Big Bang and cosmic evolution is still visible. In another 100 billion years, that evidence will be gone. The universe will have expanded so much that future scientists will have no way to discover cosmological history. They'll be trapped in a small, visible universe with no idea of the larger cosmos beyond. This is called the cosmic horizon problem, and it applies to more than just distant galaxies. It applies to other civilizations. If civilizations are rare and far apart, many of them are already beyond our cosmic horizon, moving away faster than light can travel. We'll never see their light, never detect their signals, never know they exist. And as time passes, more and more of the universe slips beyond our reach. So the barriers aren't just difficult, they're fundamental. Distance, velocity, time, synchronicity, the rarity of intelligence, the brevity of technological civilizations, the expansion of space itself. Every barrier compounds the others. Even if we overcome one, the others remain. Even if we built ships capable of near light speed, the distances are too vast. Even if civilizations could survive for millions of years, they're too far apart in space and time. Even if we could communicate faster than light somehow, there's no one close enough to talk to. The universe has structured itself in a way that guarantees isolation, not through malice or design, simply through the laws of physics operating over cosmic scales. This is the answer to the question we started with. Not whether aliens exist, but why they can't reach us, and we can't reach them. The universe is vast, almost beyond comprehension. Light, the fastest thing that exists, takes years to cross the gulfs between stars. Nothing can travel faster than light. The energy requirements to approach light speed are staggering. The engineering challenges might be insurmountable. The time required for interstellar journeys measures in decades or centuries or millennia. Civilizations rise and fall on timescales too brief to overlap. The galaxy is full of empty space, vast distances, and fundamental limits that no technology can overcome. And yet, we keep searching. We build radio telescopes and scan the skies. We send probes to the outer planets. We dream of starships and warp drives and first contact. Why? Because we can't help but hope. Because the alternative, accepting our cosmic isolation, is almost too lonely to bear. Because humans are a species that explores, that reaches beyond our grasp, that asks questions even when we suspect the answers might be disappointing. We search not because we expect to find anyone, but because the act of searching is part of what makes us human. Because looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone is looking back connects us to something larger than ourselves, even if the answer is no. Even if we're alone. The universe doesn't care about our loneliness. It doesn't care that we want to meet our neighbors, that we've imagined entire galaxies full of diverse civilizations, trading and communicating and sharing knowledge. The universe operates according to laws established at the moment of the Big Bang. Laws that create vast distances, enforce speed limits, and ensure that the space between stars remains dark and empty and impassable. We are trapped on Earth, or at best, trapped in our solar system by barriers that are not technological but fundamental. We can dream of the stars. We can point our telescopes outward and catalogue distant worlds. We can imagine what life might be like on those worlds, what strange forms evolution might have produced, what thoughts might occupy alien minds. But we cannot go there. They cannot come here. The distances are too great, the energy requirements too vast, the time too long, the synchronicity too unlikely. The universe has built walls between the stars that no amount of ingenuity can breach. This is the truth about our place in the cosmos. We are an island, a tiny island of warmth and life and consciousness in a universe that is mostly cold, mostly dark, mostly empty. We share this universe with countless other islands, perhaps other worlds where life has arisen, other species that have evolved intelligence, other civilizations that look up at their skies and wonder if they're alone. But those islands are separated by oceans so vast that no bridge can span them, no ship can make the crossing, no signal can traverse the distance in time that matters. We are connected to those distant islands only in the abstract sense that we all exist in the same universe, subject to the same laws, made of the same fundamental particles. But in every practical sense, we are alone, and we will remain alone. Not because we lack the will, or the curiosity, or the ingenuity to reach out, but because the universe itself has made contact impossible. The barriers we've discussed tonight aren't technological limitations we might someday overcome. They're woven into the fabric of space-time itself. The speed of light isn't a suggestion. It's the structure of causality. Distance isn't a challenge to be conquered. It's the geometry of the universe. Time isn't an inconvenience. It's the dimension in which events unfold. These aren't problems waiting for solutions. They're the terms and conditions of existence. The rules of the game. We're all playing, whether we like them or not. And perhaps that's okay. Perhaps accepting our isolation allows us to appreciate what we have. This one planet, this one biosphere, this one brief moment of consciousness in a vast unconscious cosmos. We are, as far as we can tell, the only beings in this corner of the galaxy capable of understanding the universe. The only ones who have figured out the laws of physics and chemistry and biology that govern existence, the only ones who have looked at the cosmic microwave background and deduced the Big Bang, who have measured the expansion of space and calculated the age of the universe, who have split atoms and mapped genomes and sent machines to other worlds. That's extraordinary. Not diminished by our isolation, but perhaps enhanced by it. We are the universe, becoming aware of itself, a small part of the cosmos organizing into a form complex enough to contemplate the whole. And if there are others, if other worlds have produced other minds that can think and wonder and discover, then the universe is even more remarkable, not despite the distances that separate us, but because each isolated island of consciousness represents an independent miracle, a separate emergence of complexity from simplicity, of meaning from mechanism, of understanding from mere matter. So yes, we are alone. The aliens, if they exist, cannot reach us. We cannot reach them. The universe has ensured our separation with barriers more absolute than any wall or ocean or mountain range ever constructed. Barriers built from the fundamental constants of nature, from the speed of light and the vast emptiness of space and the relentless flow of time. We will never shake hands with an alien, never trade knowledge or culture or art with another civilization, never see our world through truly foreign eyes. We are cosmically quarantined, isolated in our corner of the galaxy by distances and speeds and durations that make contact not just difficult, but impossible. And that's the truth we've been avoiding. The truth that all our science fiction and all our hopeful searches and all our messages sent into the void have been trying to deny. We are alone. Not alone in the sense that life exists only on Earth, though that's possible, but alone in the sense that even if 1,000,000 civilizations exist in our galaxy right now, even if the universe is teeming with intelligence and consciousness and culture, we will never meet them. They might as well not exist for all the difference it makes to us. We live in a universe full of unreachable neighbors, full of distant islands we can see but never visit, full of lights in the darkness that will forever remain nothing more than lights, beautiful, mysterious, tantalizing, but eternally beyond our reach. The universe is not the connected galactic community of our imaginations. It's a collection of isolated pockets of consciousness, separated by gulfs so immense that connection is impossible. Each pocket alone, with its own discoveries, its own struggles, its own eventual fate. No shared journey, no cosmic federation, no meeting of minds across the stars. Just individual worlds, individual civilizations, individual moments of awareness appearing briefly in the darkness before fading back into silence. That's the reality of our existence. And perhaps the sooner we accept it, the sooner we can focus on what we actually have. This world, this life, this brief opportunity to understand and appreciate and care for the one tiny island of complexity we've been given in an otherwise simple universe. We can't reach the stars. The stars can't reach us. But we can understand them. We can look up into the night sky and see those distant lights, not as destinations, but as reminders. Reminders of the vastness we're part of. Reminders of the laws that govern all existence. Reminders that we are, in the end, products of this universe, made from atoms forged in the cores of ancient stars, built according to principles established in the first moments after the Big Bang, connected to the cosmos not through communication or travel, but through the deep, fundamental fact that we are made of the same stuff and follow the same rules as everything else that exists. The barriers are real. The isolation is permanent, but the understanding remains. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it has to be, because the universe doesn't negotiate. It doesn't make exceptions. It simply is what it is. Vast, ancient, magnificent, and fundamentally lonely. Full of wonders we can observe but never touch. Full of possibilities we can imagine but never realize. Full of questions we can ask but never fully answer. We are cosmically alone, not because we failed to reach out, but because the universe built walls we cannot climb, and we will remain alone. Forever, not by choice, but by the inexorable logic of physics and geometry and time. Thanks for staying with me through this long exploration of our cosmic isolation. It's not a comforting conclusion, but it's the truth that the laws of physics force upon us. The universe is not a place where civilizations meet and connect and share their journeys. It's a place where each island of consciousness stands alone, separated from all others by distances and speeds and times that make contact impossible. We are here. They, if they exist, are there. And the gulf between here and there cannot be bridged. Not now, not ever. That's the reality we must accept. And once we do, perhaps we can finally appreciate the one place we actually have. This pale blue dot, this fragile island, this brief moment of light in the cosmic darkness, not as a stepping stone to the stars, but as home, the only home we will ever have, the only place in the vast universe where we truly belong. Alone, yes, but here, and maybe that's enough.